Welcome to the Moxie Press podcast. Today we have an interview, or let's call it a conversation. Interview is weird. I'm not an interviewer. That implies that I have some kind of journalistic background or integrity. Barely. Just kidding. Plenty. We have plenty of integrity here at Moxie Press. Today is an episode with Aleksander Aleksander. They wrote a lovely nonfiction piece about food poverty and their own experience with hunger. As someone trying to make it in the United States, in a state, we get into this in the show, people who would not expect there to be so much disparity in terms of like food safety and access. So it's a really great talk. We dig into everything from hopelessness around the system, the U.S. system, United States in general, all the way to where we can find hope and what we can do together to achieve a better life for everybody, as well as their tips for being a writer and how their process goes. So we run the gamut. It's an interesting discussion. We cover it all. So please enjoy Aleksander Aleksander and their piece, We're Fucking Hungry.
Three years ago, I cried over an egg. It was the only egg in the mostly bare fridge, and it was my greatest treasure. All that remained in our kitchen cupboards was a giant bag of rice purchased months beforehand, thankfully still going strong, oatmeal, and expired packages of dried chickpeas and black beans. We did not have money to buy another carton of eggs or bus fare for the closest food bank 45 minutes away. This last egg was the most precious thing in the world to me then, the last until my first paycheck came in after months unemployed, and I cried because I should have boiled it. I cried because I mourned the egg residue burned in the pan, and I cried more because there was only a little flavor. I cried harder at my ingratitude, how spoiled I was, to wish for something fresh and green. I cried the hardest at my situation, the hell that is poverty. This was not the last time I experienced food insecurity. Balancing daily nutrition paycheck to paycheck has been an ongoing, terrifying struggle. When I go to the grocery store, I stare at the card reader and hold my breath until it says approved. I spend $60 and carry just one bag home. There have been points where I walk past grocery stores still lit at night and think to myself, there's just glass between me and food. You experience this too, haven't you? It is an insult to our intelligence to call surging food prices inflation. It is blatant price gouging. In his famous quote, Dr. Ernesto Guevara said, I envy you. You North Americans are very lucky. You are fighting the most important fight of them. You live in the belly of the beast. I wonder if Che knew that meant being digested alive. In the United States, we are digested in the empire's belly and uses calories to fuel the war machine. Ironically, as empire consumes us, it poisons our food and pollutes our waters. To add insult to injury, it is starving us. While we go into debt to feed ourselves, Christo-fascist entities like the Heritage Foundation prey on working people's struggles to advance their political agendas. People are starving, and the oligarchy's puppets work to cut $30 billion from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, over the next 10 years. Republicans have a long history of resenting food programs and voting to slash billions from SNAP. But make no mistake, 4 Democrats, Don Davis, North Carolina, Bishop, Georgia, Sorensen, Illinois, and Caravello, Colorado, vote to approve Food Insecure Farm Bill 2024. What is the Democratic Party's solution? A strongly worded letter to the Commander-in-Chief pointing out all the things they could do to address food costs. Led by Senator Elizabeth Warren, suggestions that included creating a joint task force to investigate what we already know. Mind you, this is the same politician who's eating well herself at a swanky Cambridge restaurant and could not be bothered to get up from the table when a constituent approached her. A refugee from Gaza, the constituent had already lost 68 family members to Zionist terror attacks and wanted to know how many more had to die before Warren would call for a ceasefire. It's nice to meet you, Warren said. I'm having dinner. Everywhere, working bodies struggle to feed themselves and their family. In Kenya, nutritionists worry about public health because of protein's heightened costs. In New Zealand, common food prices soar past 50% and force double income families to rely on food banks. In Argentina, food prices rose up 70% in 3 months, and thanks to President Javier Milei's maddening libertarian reforms, many have to scavenge for food. In Bangladesh, a game was made out of food insecurity. In Egypt, the price of historically subsidized bread has increased to further federal revenue, all at the expense of 65 million Egyptians who rely on bread as a main staple. 12 years ago, the 25th January Revolution in Egypt erupted after decades under the Mubarak regime. It was sparked by police brutality, abuse of state of emergency laws, political censorship, electoral fraud, high employment rates, food inflation prices, and criminally low wages. The rallying cry was bread, food, and dignity. I ask you, beloved reader, what becomes of the circus when there is no bread? I ask you this before the next act of American political theater ensues tonight. While the clowns dance across the stage, honking their horns and arguing who's the most loyal to Israel, we will be hungry. The clowns will promise change, security, prosperity, and we will still be hungry. After tonight's presidential debate, the clowns will sip donor gifted champagne and eat PAC sponsored gourmet meal while they send us emails and ask us for our money. In the halls of Congress, the clowns will debate and filibuster and argue and showboat and starve us with their weaponized incompetence, but they will stand together and applaud a genocidal monster. The clowns promise us things that are already inherently ours by right. They promise us freedom and dignity. They make promises while signaling deals with the oligarchy, while signing deals with the oligarchy because this is the circus's true ringmaster. We deserve more than this. We are owed safety from state violence, and we deserve to be held and cared for during life's difficulties. In a country with over 50 million vacant houses, no one should be left without shelter. Food without poison should not come at higher cost, and one should be able to drink water from any tap without fear of lead. We deserve more than decent, more than the bare minimum. Abundance has been gifted to us by this plant and stewarded by our hard labor. We deserve our bread, and roses too, and they are ours for the receiving if we just take care of each other.
That was Aleksander Aleksander with a piece from their Substack, We're Fucking Hungry. The Substack is Seedgiver, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So everyone pause this, go subscribe, and then come right back to this. Don't turn this off, just pause it and go subscribe. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
For those of our listeners and viewers who haven't read your work or are not familiar with you, please let's start with a little bit about you, your background, where you come from,
Yeah.
sort of your journey as a writer to now.
Yeah. Let's see. Starting off with my background, I like to say that I was born in imperialism's cradle, like when I'm feeling a little extra snarky, over in Panama Canal Zone. I was a military kid, moved around a bit. So I have a
Okay,
lot of
got
firsthand
it.
experience, seeing military families who, a lot of whom, while being deployed and moving around, being separated from their families, a lot of them can't afford basic nutrition. And also being very familiar with like most of the many recruits, like it's like what other folks have called economic draft, where folks sign up for the military for the promises of what do they call it in basic training, like a hot plate and a cot, like just shelter,
Okay.
food, education. Like education is the big one. Spent most of my time growing up in the Midwest before I moved to West Coast with promises of, oh, blue state, things are obviously better, lots of changes, new opportunities, and honestly hasn't changed that much. It's not that much different. Given what a lot of policy decisions that are made that really enforce scarcity among communities all over the country. And the more I, have read and connected with other folks from different places, and especially in the last 4 years, become more familiar with it, just like the problems that we see here are just echoes of problems that are happening all over the world. And that just kind of like that informs a lot of my writing currently. Started off like really wanting to promote upcoming books that I'm in the middle of writing, mostly speculative fiction. But as I started the newsletter, it felt very silly to just focus on, like, oh, here's this book I'm promising will eventually be finished and I'll eventually query and eventually publish, when so much is going on and I can be writing about that in terms of like not just how it affects me, but my neighbors, people I work with, live with, people that I've connected to from around the world. And yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. Right now, I just focus on writing essays and sharing them on Substack, while I gradually work on my novels in the background. But more on that eventually when they get finished.
Look, at least, at the very least, you identified maybe this needs to happen right now while I finish the other thing. So you're filling the space. No one's waiting and, for you to write anything. I think we at Moxie Press also feel that pull between like fiction and nonfiction and highlighting things like this because we're like, oh yeah, these are like real world things.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is affecting people we know and love. So we were happy to see your piece because I think that really stood out to us of like, this is what we need right now in this moment. Um, you said you're on the West Coast. You're in Washington, correct?
I am. I'm in the Seattle area.
Yeah, yeah. So I know just coming from California myself, I think people would be surprised at the disparity between certain parts of these states, the coastal states,
Mm-hmm.
especially California. I initially grew up, I've talked about this before, but like in the central California, which is
Mm-hmm.
like it's redneck country, to be
Right.
honest. Like
Yeah.
it is
No, I've been through there. Were you
truly,
close to Fresno or
yeah.
further up? Yeah.
I grew up actually really close to Modesto,
Okay.
which is where if people have seen American Graffiti, it's where that sits, where George Lucas is
Mm-hmm.
from. And even he was like, I'm going to be a Marin County guy. I can't do it here. Um, yeah. And so I think to your point, people would be incredibly surprised if they didn't know any better how much large swaths of these states, Oregon as well, Washington,
Mm-hmm.
California, are probably they closely more resemble what you would see in the Midwest, what people would think of as I don't want to say run down. That's a
Oh no, it's all
derogatory
good.
term,
Like
but
when I
yeah.
moved here, like it was the first time I ever heard the term flyover states to refer to like the bulk of the United States, and I was so offended. Just like, excuse me,
We're just here to be passed
what?
up. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so much focus is put on the major cities, which don't fare much better. I lived in LA for 12 years. There are beautiful areas. I'm going back next week for something, but there's
Mm-hmm.
also a lot of. I lived in Hollywood for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think just all that to say, people would definitely, some people will be shocked at how much
Yes.
it would be
Yes.
surprising to them for sure.
Yes.
Um,
I recently wrote a piece on that called Empire in Blue, just
mhm,
talking about experiences not just Seattle, but like King County overall,
mhm,
where like you go to these blue states, you go to these cities where that's supposed to be, oh, they actually value human rights. Oh, I'll have like autonomy to my body or marriage equality, et cetera, et cetera. You run through the list, it's going to be so much better. It's not as racist as, say, Mississippi or homophobic as Arkansas, just like this perception. But then you come here and you can see it's so obvious in just the landscape alone, where you can just like walk a couple blocks and you go from like an 85-acre gated community in the middle of Seattle with a golf course, and then only 2 miles down, 1 mile down, you see people sleeping on the street
yeah.
or folks having to figure out how to load groceries into the bus, which is almost always late, as it is pretty much anywhere here. And here, I feel a little bit more acutely for the fact that we have so many like global tech companies based out here. And, even though redlining hasn't been formally legal in Washington for quite some time, you can see it in just like terms of like where is the wealth being kept? Where is it being hoarded? Where is it being distributed to various folks? And usually just through a foundation. And after, nonprofit applies many, many grants, and it goes to what's essentially business with a special tax code, as I call nonprofits. Meanwhile, people are going hungry, people who have a full-time job with good benefits, people who have double income, folks who don't have children yet, but if they choose to have children. Like housing prices are skyrocketing, grocery prices are going up, our healthcare system, like a lot of it, like not only do we serve like folks in Washington in the healthcare systems here, but like folks come all the way in from Alaska, Montana, Idaho to access emergency services. And frankly, it's collapsing. The strain is too much, and it's not getting any support. And I know that that's just a trend that's happening everywhere, whether it's here in Seattle or you're looking at Chicago, New York,
Yeah.
rural healthcare systems. Forget about it. And
Um,
yeah, sorry, going off my tangent.
no, 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 please. No, I was just going to ask, like, do you, I know it's hard to be, and to quote Che Guevara, in the belly of the beast, do you, being so educated and knowing so much about this, do you see any way out, light at the end of the tunnel, possibly? And you
Well,
don't
for
have
one
to. It's
thing,
not
oh
incumbent on
no,
you.
like I think talking from like my own personal beliefs, there's always a way out. Like you can look
Mhm.
at any and every empire that's existed in history, any regime, any authoritarian government, and they always collapse. Whether it's in less than 5 years or 150, 250 years, I think was the like most commonly quoted. Like, oh, this is how long empires typically last, 250 years.
Mhm.
And ultimately, what keeps these systems up and going is people. And I don't believe in the system. I don't believe that we're going to vote our way out of these circumstances, as we've seen when we all rallied together, like in 2020. Nothing has changed. But I definitely have seen more people become motivated to invest in mutual aid, invest in each other, and take care of one another. And more people are becoming aware. Some of it is like, oh, now that's impacting me. I'm making it. Others are actually just like we're actually talking to each other more than we ever have before. Like we have these fun little walking computers with us, and we see what's going on in the world,
Right.
despite a lot of censorship attempts left and right. So I personally think that getting out of this, it's going to have to come from people, grassroots level, with more direct action, more direct aid, and helping each other. Like one great example, and I use the word great reluctantly because it is horrible. Like the recent hurricanes that swept through the
Mm.
southeast, where last I read, FEMA's like calculated like $750 per family or individual impacted. And this is like having the same point where like billions of dollars were signed off to go to war.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm seeing left and right all these fundraiser campaigns. You can see photos and videos of people getting their boots on and not lifting themselves up by their bootstraps, but actually lifting each other up and getting the chainsaws to move like trees out of the way and helping family members. And all the meanwhile, like nothing's being done about landlords that are still charging people rent when their houses are completely destroyed.
Right.
Ultimately,
And
we're the ones taking care of each other.
I
That's what I
think,
see.
and that's great because I think that's a great point, especially let's say since I want to say since 2008, since the dawn of social media, like two things kind of happened. One, we've seen we're more open than ever before to vitriol and disinformation and misinformation. It's more disinformation. People say misinformation. I'm like, it's being done with the intent.
Yes, it's very
Um,
deliberate.
yeah.
It's not a
But
mistake.
also, I think the democratization of kind of being able to reach out to people and community has also fed into not just like millennials, like myself, elder millennials, but also, Gen Z and their generation, I think, is also just inspired to do more because I think there is a more DIY attitude to the world. Like our parents would, there were generations who did march and they did stuff. I don't know if they would have been as proactive as people are or try to be today. And that's just more platforms, more ability to reach more people. So I'm pretty much with you, especially in the fact that I think, yes, I think my wife would also, and co-founder and owner of Moxie Press, would agree. Um, the change does come from people helping people in community. If it was up to us, we'd be living like on a commune with our closest
Oh
friends
no, it's tempting
in the
every
country.
day. And like
Um,
even speaking on like, the more old school like marches, flyers, et
mhm.
cetera, like we're seeing more, I would argue more pushback against that than ever
Yeah.
before. And like, but like organizers, protesters are so responsive to it now because we can communicate with each other. And even like when the 2020 uprisings were happening, a lot of Lives Matter protesters were getting tips from people on the ground in Palestine saying, "This is the surveillance tools we've dealt with that you're seeing right now. We're seeing this is how you start to navigate this." Like we're all like, it's just this constant loop where everybody's like dealing with the same thing,
Mhm.
like the occupations, the price gouging, being pushed out of their homes,
Yeah. I mean, you even
and it
mentioned
all goes down to the same group of like small, wealthy, greedy people,
yeah. You
basically.
also mentioned like the hurricane and stuff. I remember we were talking here about in I forget where, but there was something. Oh, I think like in California or somewhere, people were like concerned about how they're going to deal with like sweltering like conditions and whatnot. And people in Texas were like, "Here's what you do." Or no, people
Yes.
in London when they had a huge heat wave, they don't really have AC out in London
Hmm.
in homes. They're like, "Oh my god, like how do we even deal with this?" And people in the U.S. are like, "Don't worry, gotcha.
This
Here's
is
what
how
you
I
do." Like
got
give each
you.
other tips. Yeah. So no, you're right.
Oh.
I mean, like for everything from yeah, like Palestinians helping protesters here to just even that is
Hmm.
super remarkable to me. And maybe one of the few positives of things like social media.
Yeah.
Um, Going back to your piece real quick, I also want to see like how are you? The piece is about. I mean, like
You can
it is
ask me, have you
about
eaten
like.
today? Are you okay?
But I mean, like for real though, like we talk about how things like don't change much. I don't assume that you're maybe crying over an egg right now, but there
No,
is
not
still
yet.
like have you seen your situation improve at least drastically enough to where this feels more like a cautionary tale rather than a I don't know the right word, like relevant anecdote.
No. Honestly, frankly, no. Like it feels and whenever like the experience I was writing about was when I was looking for work after having to take time off for my own health,
Mhm.
and no resources were closely available to me. Or if they were again 45 minutes by bus away, and I didn't even have bus fare. Currently, it just like I have full time employment, have an apartment, we're getting by, but it's still paycheck to paycheck, and it
Mhm.
feels incredibly fragile, as I'm sure it is for a lot of people right now. Where it's not just me. I forgot the percentage because I was reading about this a little bit, but it was like horrendously high, where more and more people throughout the states are in that paycheck to paycheck cycle, where it's just like one accident, one emergency, one anything, and it'll be back to that point. And I see this just people all over, not, and I'm not just talking about like, oh, this is what I read about in this article. This is what I see in social media, but what I see day to day with folks that if I don't work with them directly, it's people that are being served at the nonprofit organization I work with or other organizations, or, I'm getting more involved with mutual aid groups in my area. And it's like, it's been so healing in so many ways. One, just like this sense of like, oh, I have someone to reach out to. Even though, 1,000 miles away from family, still like kind of navigating social interactions in the Seattle freeze. But it's been so healing to be in a position where like not only are we like providing like direct aid and supporting each other and people in our community, but having very real conversations with each other, or even just like sometimes when we like reach out, for help with each other. It's something as simple as like, hey, can someone give me a tip on how to navigate our health system to find a doctor for
Hmm.
this treatment I need? And I'm not being listened to, so I need to switch over to like, hey, can you help me hide my cats from my landlord? You know, like small stuff like that.
It all matters. It's all on a
It all
spectrum.
matters. But yeah, it's just like I feel like a lot of folks, especially in Seattle, there's a lot of posturing. There's a lot of pretending to be better than where folks actually are, or like like kind of speaking by image is very big here.
Hmm.
Like, and this is me coming like being Midwestern, coming to the West Coast, where I'm just like, oh, that's weird.
Well, I think there's degrees of that everywhere.
Right.
Like,
No one wants to seem poor, quote unquote. It's like it's a big point of pride, and like some of it just comes with from classism, where it's just like, oh, if you're poor, it's because you don't work hard enough. It's because you're not smart enough. It's because you're not putting in that 110%. You wouldn't be in this situation if you made this financial decision. Or, you talk about these crazy finance guides where it's just like, just don't eat avocado toast. Doesn't mean millennials have heard it. And you will be able to buy a house. Meanwhile, average housing costs here in Seattle are like somewhere in the 400 grand average.
Jesus.
Like I remember talking with coworkers a year ago where someone had a neighbor putting their house up for sale, and they're just kind of like, oh, I want someone cool next move next door to me, and mentioning it just like, yeah, someone's looking for a house, and I'm just like, oh, cool. And like this is in Tacoma, which gets a lot of flack from folks in Seattle because it's further down south, and insert long history we don't have time for. And I was just, and another coworker was looking at it, and she's just like, "Yeah, it's a great deal." And she's like, "It's not even $1 million." And I'm just like, "Excuse me, a
Amazing deal.
house for $1 million? Like less than like four, like what was it, 3 bedrooms,
Think it's, I don't want to
right?"
spend a million on a house, but if it's almost a million, I'm in.
Like, okay, that's a deal before it gets so expensive. And this is like now it's getting to the point where like you see these hurricanes, wildfires everywhere, and people are still investing so much money into shelter, and it can be gone just like that.
Yeah.
And insurance companies aren't covering that. Federal government aid isn't coming in like it needs to. And like now, I think I saw like just last month where Zillow is now putting in like extra data into the houses that are for sale. Just like, oh, this is how vulnerable it is to XYZ climate catastrophe, natural disaster. So there goes trying to sell it if you're if you
Yeah.
just happen to have a house that's anywhere,
If you're on the
honestly.
Florida coast, don't even attempt to list on Zillow. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that you brought up that I think is very crucial is that people are so scared to be honest with themselves. And I think I get it. Like, I'm personally in a very privileged position. We own our home, but we also own our home, and that has taught us the fact that maybe because of things like climate, we're in Las Vegas. We're like,
Mm-hmm.
don't want to own, like maybe want to be a little more nimble in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, that's a hard
but
question
like
for everybody.
we're very lucky in that point, but even like us, like it there's still like it doesn't seem like enough because of rising costs, and it's easy, like you said, to blame inflation. It goes well beyond inflation because inflation has
Mm-hmm.
technically gotten a lot better. Like, then
Yeah,
why am I still paying as much for groceries as I was a year or two ago? um
exactly.
and so I
Like talking with someone who has lived in Seattle since her young adult life, and she's like in her 50s.
Mhm.
Now, she was talking about like when she was my age, her apartment in Capitol Hill was like 400 something dollars.
Happy
And to
days.
be fair, I'm the one who asked because I was just like, okay, I want to torture myself. How much was it in the 90s? And you can even chart out like, okay, how much would that be now with inflation? And that's still what, 1,200,
Yeah.
$1,300, like quite a bit more, but nowhere near housing costs now in that area. Over
Yeah.
$2,000 easily for a studio.
If someone told me I could have an apartment for like $1,200, $1,300, I'd be like, no, like that would be insane. I'd be like, that's amazing. Can never find anything like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I think if people were willing, and that's partially why I ask you, not to like put you on the spot to see if you're okay, just to be like, we all need to be, I think, more honest with our positions in life, because it helps more than I think people think it does. You being willing and just, I mean, brave enough to write about your experience, I think is helpful for others who are maybe ashamed. Might be, something that they feel when it comes to not being able to afford food. Um, or living paycheck to paycheck. And what I was going to say is that, like, and we still see that sometimes where it's like, yeah, we're one disaster away, especially with three kids, one disaster away from being totally wiped out in our savings. Like, where, it's again, something else on the spectrum of like, unless you're at a certain tax bracket that is well
Where you're
beyond,
not really taxed anymore.
yeah, exactly. When you're in the
Exactly.
non-tax brackets, um, you're still so vulnerable to a lot of things that are, I mean, maybe just more relevant for your position in life, but still, like, it's ridiculous. I started reading or listening to, I listen to a lot more these days than I actually sit down and read, um, a book about migrant workers in California. A anthropologist and doctor, like the weirdest, like most convenient combination of things to write this book, was just talking about how, sort of like what Shay said, the US is a weird thing because, like, these issues are global, like you say in your piece. Like, these issues, you see it in New Zealand and other countries you might think, would be well off. The US is weird because the disparity between those who are rich and those who are poor makes like zero sense. And the fact that we technically have access to some of the best food
Yes.
and resources in the world,
Yeah.
compared to those who can access it, is unique among the world. I mean, maybe in the UK you see something similar, and the common thread there is imperialist white people, and both of our countries come from the same people. But yeah, I just think it's something that, like, I don't know if people actually like realize the extent. Um, Especially like here at home, like, this shouldn't be an issue technically. We're the wealthiest country in the world. Why?
Yeah.
Why
Like
is
there's so
food?
much. There's so much of everything to the point of mass production, like overproduction. And we live in an economy where if, like, say for instance, an auto manufacturer doesn't sell as many cars as expected, they're not donating those cars, they're not recycling them, they're just being parked in empty lots left to rot. Or fast fashion industry with even like, oh, the super expensive fashionable wear, like, oh, if those don't sell, they would rather burn it than to have extra lying around just so they can keep the value of fabric.
Mm-hmm.
And then meanwhile, then you have the other side where, like, there's so much, and I'm just going to like talk about clothing because that's a huge like source of
Right.
pollution and inequity, where it's just like so much, like, for one thing, US standpoint, a lot of clothes going through all these thrift stores. You're seeing like those prices surging, and it's not because, like, we, like, some folks like to blame it on, like, oh, it's like folks coming in buying this and then reselling it. No, it's, we're talking about donate materials, no cost. They're not paying their employees enough. They're selling to equally broke people and making profit. And on top of that, a lot of them have that nonprofit tax status. And again, and no same, like, say whoever's in charge of like whatever fast fashion company using sweatshops labor where they outsource it, takes them like a bulk of the profit that they're keeping away from the workers, and then they're just donating that to that same nonprofit thrift store, and it's just like this closed cycle of maintaining all the wealth in one hand while extracting more and more and more from everybody else. And that's across food, that's across clothes, that's across shelter, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. Like, you go
No,
ahead.
no, please. No, I think it's extremely important, especially like the fashion industry is one that, fast fashion. And if Jessie were here, she would be like, "Oh my god! Like, we want to talk tangent. We can go on a fast fashion tangent." It is one of the most wasteful
Mm-hmm.
things, and like part of it is that I used to work for like a job who did a lot of collaborations with like fashion brands and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But we always tried to like do sustainable fashion, but it's so
Mm-hmm.
expensive. So I'm like, well, if
Exactly.
we all had like better wages, we could put money into these companies who are getting
Right?
responsibly sourced materials from union factories, even if they're overseas. And I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
and then you
Yeah.
have, yeah, fast fashion, but also like Goodwill and whatnot. Like their CEO makes so much money. They're tax exempt, I
Yes.
believe. Like, and yeah, it's, I don't
Yeah,
want to
that's
end it
exactly what
on
I was
such a
thinking.
down note, but everything's trash and the world's on fire.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And it's just, where was my thought? And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. I think, I mean, as we kind of wind down, because time has literally flown right by for us, which is insane. Um, I don't want to lose sight of your work and the
Yes, thank
writing
you.
that you're doing. We could probably talk for days about our a disillusionment with the system. I'm sure. When it comes to writing, I guess I have two questions to round this out. The first question: do you find it difficult to be as consistent as you want to be with writing a blog? Because that's always been my issue. And I'm not saying that it has to be yours. I'm just saying that, like, whenever I've sat down to do something consistently, we tried to do this podcast weekly and we're like, maybe we should just do it when we have something valuable to put out. But there is something about that discipline that does lend itself to good work.
Yeah. I think for me personally, a lot of my writing time is juggled between work, errands, family, other responsibilities. And it lends a lot back to like, our previous discussion where it's just a lot of us who are just like a lot of folks who are just trying to survive don't have as much time like to put in the quote unquote discipline. Like that word discipline and self-control and all these other things, they're used like they're carted around a lot in writing circles or the arts, or and I reference like, oh, financial advice.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, oh, you just have to control yourself, you have to have discipline, you have to da 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 da, all of it being like this is all your fault. And I am really grateful that, I'm finding a community of writers and seeing a shift toward this acknowledgement. Just like a lot of privilege is needed to spend hours literally just talking to yourself on paper
Mm-hmm.
until you have it just right when you want to share with folks. So like now it's a lot easier for me now, like as I go from like, oh, living day by day to living like week by week, and slowly hopefully like keep up this nice steady build up of taking care of like personal needs and that of my family. But with it though, it's just like also asking yourself just like how much, like what's important to me. And I know my writing is very very important to me, so there is like a little bit of that discipline, like carving out that time. But again, it's like that's because I have a little bit more privilege than I did when I was crying over an egg a few years ago.
I think, one of the things too, yeah, if you ask like a tech or CEO bro or something, they'd be like, you're fine. All you have to do is like eat less, don't sleep, hustle, write instead of sleep. You'll get there.
You're talking about my
Um,
neighbors.
Sorry, I hope they can hear me. I hope they
Oh
can.
no, I hope they can. Yeah, they need to hear it. Where it's just like none of that's sustainable. None of that's healthy. It's
Yeah.
not good for you. It's
Hustle
not
culture is the
good.
worst.
It's devaluing your labor, honestly, and also it's not reliable. Like look at all the tech layoffs that we're seeing left and right. And AI is one of the big markers now, where folks are all excited about it. And I actually know a few people who are part of teams working on it, just because of
Mhm.
where I live, and it's you're building the very thing that they're going to replace you with. These CEOs that you look up to, that you idolize,
Uh,
and you're not going to see those like six-figure paychecks or those bonuses like you have for the last couple decades for much longer. And like basically get with the people. and get with the
Yeah,
people, start
exactly.
building those
Start making friends, start
relationships.
making community.
Yeah, exactly. And
Um,
start investing in like actual relationships, not
yeah.
networking.
No, I think it's a very important point to make. Like you said it earlier too, being able to find a real community of people. I mean, that's helped us. Like we moved out here knowing only a couple people, but like now that we've, done a couple festivals, like, we're doing events and stuff, I think finding our people has been very encouraging. It's keeping us going for sure with all of this. And talking to people like you on this podcast has been really cool, cooler than I think we even expected it to be. I guess the last question we ask everyone on who appears. One, thank you so much for pointing out that it is. I didn't want to assume when your answer would be to the previous question, but I was secretly hoping that it would be like, taking it step by step. I'm trying to get more as I get more time, give my passion more time and not trying to force it. I think a lot of people, especially people who want to be writers, become obsessed with the idea that if they don't churn out content, they're not going to be, what I mean? Like it can become unhealthy. And I'm happy that you're here to say, like, take it easy. Like your health, your position in life comes first. Like you need to be able to get the time. But the last question is, do you have any advice for anybody who wants to write a blog or wants to, work on their book, whatever?
Same old bread and butter, read and write, just do it. And I feel like I love that you mentioned like the pressure to make constant contact all the time, churn it out, like, and becoming like your own marketer, publicist, et cetera, influencer. But all you're going to do is end up like chasing your own tail and not actually do the thing that you're here to do that you really love, and that's right. And writing is just us talking to people, whoever the reader is. So I would say find a good group of folks who are really supportive of you, whether they're writers, big readers or not, or just, a friend who's neither, but like really cares about you and you pursuing your dream and supporting, like holding you accountable or reminding you, hey, come back to reality and spend time with your loved ones, eat something, and just keep going. Take care of yourself, take
Amazing.
care of other people.
I love it. That's a great note to end on. See, we found it. We found the happiness at the end, I think. But thank you again so much for joining me here. This has been a joy. Where can people find you other than
Yeah.
Substack? Or if it's just Substack, then
Yeah, yeah,
give us the
yeah.
name.
Like right now, you can definitely find me in Substack at Alexander Alexander. My newsletter is called Seedgiver. I'm on Instagram, and actually this weekend I will be launching my website finally at
Oh,
alexanderalexander.com. So it's a great
amazing. This will be
time.
dropping shortly after that. So people go
Yes,
check it out. It should be live by now in that case.
exactly. And just say hi.
Amazing. All right. Well, in that case, I will let you go. Thank you again so much for joining.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew. I really appreciate talking with you today.
We did it. See? Told you it was a good talk. Find Moxie Press on social media: TikTok, Instagram, Threads. Like I tell you, we've been loving Threads lately. Threads has been a good one for us. You can also find us, most importantly, on our newsletter. That's where these author spotlights drop. That's where we talk about all the things that we're doing. We just got done, as of this recording, not only doing the Las Vegas Book Festival, but also a separate event that we got invited to. And we're going to be at all these places. So if you want to know where, come check us out. If, especially if you're in the Vegas area, there's probably something that we're trying to do around town. If not, don't worry. You do not have to be here. It's October and it's still swelteringly hot. So enjoy us from where you are. Like, subscribe, do all the things you need to do with the podcast, both on YouTube and your preferred podcast app. Share the newsletter. And if you're a writer, submit to the author spotlight. This is our pride and joy. We love talking with you guys. We love learning about you, your process. We love learning where your inspiration comes from. I mean this. when I say that the podcast is such a source of, I don't know, like it gives me good vibes. It's a source of hope for us, and that we get to talk to such incredible people in different situations, as you heard in this episode. But they're very honest conversations. I know you have a million choices for podcasts, and we're honored that you would take your time to listen to this one or watch it. Um, but even if you didn't, we're still going to do it because we love doing it and it's a lot of fun. So that's about it. Do all the things, listen to all the things, subscribe to all the things, Moxie Press. Um, Otherwise, you know what I'm about to say. So we say it every episode. Lead with Moxie.